Hi everyone, I'm Shamaila Chaudhry. I'm the president of the American Pakistan Foundation. I'm dialing in from Washington, DC, and I've been in this position for the past year. I've been familiar with the APF since its inception a decade ago. I used to be on the board, and I've seen APF evolve into like this very dynamic organization, which is focused both on Pakistan and development and improving livelihoods there, but then also very much focused on uplifting the community and in particular youth in the American Pakistani community. And we've got a bunch of programs that focus on kind of building bridges and community empowerment, mostly on like educating people and sending folks to Pakistan to work in NGOs there. We have a UN program where we have a platform to talk about Pakistan's development issues, and we have a big focus on mentorship. But the latest and newest focus of ours has been on civic engagement, and we back in January of this year, we had our annual board retreat. This year it was in Houston, and one of our board members, Mahmood Panjwani, who's an entrepreneur based in Silicon Valley, he felt very motivated by the issue of climate change, actually, to start increasing kind of civic engagement activities in our community, and thought that APF could be a good platform to do that. And not specifically on climate change, but that's an issue that he feels very passionately about, and he figured that there are others like him in the community, and at the same time, we also have some space that needs to be filled in the community with regards to kind of exercising our vote, and we'll get into those statistics in our conversation. But then also, before we can tell people to vote, we also have to do our part to create an ecosystem for understanding what civic engagement means and providing civic education, and then also engaging each other in civil discourse, which we don't see much of in our political system or in our kind of social practices either. I'm observing it less and less. And so the way that I see the APF Get Out the Vote initiative, which is specifically focusing on voting for November, it's grown to focus more or as well on kind of these various ecosystem issues. And so as we've been building that initiative, we put together a group of amazing team members, Misal and Wase included. Fatima and Memil are also on our leadership council and have been involved in a variety of conversations on this. And I'm so proud to say we have 20 or so folks that meet regularly through the week. We have at least one formal meeting every week, but sometimes we're meeting 3 or 4 times a week to basically orchestrate a schedule of engagement from now until November. And understandably, there was a lot of time we had, starting in January, before we could actually do typical Get Out the Vote activities, which is phone banking and canvassing, which we'll do eventually. So we decided to get more into the advocacy side of things. And so I'll let Misal and Wasi talk more about this, but we have a Pledge to Vote campaign. We also are using our significant social media presence to push out facts and attitudes and assumptions that we have about our community's role. And so I'm excited to be here and have this partnership with Millennial Brown because first of all, I think Misal is great. She's been a great team member to us and a wonderful friend to APF. And when I saw her website and she told me about it, I figured, this is something exactly APF wants to support, because our whole job is to provide a platform for future leaders, and so we're here for that. So I've spoken enough, and I'll definitely be more engaged in the conversation as well. But over to you, Misal.
Yeah, Shmaila, thank you for kind of introducing, everything that we've been talking about and the whole reason why we're here today. And so, yeah, this collaboration between APF and Millennial Brown is really rooted in the fact that both of our organizations believe how important it is to vote, and not only vote, but get yourself involved in advocacy and politics and other socio-political issues. And a huge part of Millennial Brown, an online community publication that I've created with the help of Isa and our amazing team. We have about 40 to 45 students from across the US that engage in controversial, bold, opinions, and they write stories about it, whether that be, critiquing Joe Biden and his entire, platform that he's running on, or critiquing, how does this artist, how is he becoming a major, person that's representing Desi music in pop culture, for example. And so our goal is to really like illuminate things that people aren't discussing enough and to do it boldly, and also be very inclusive at the same time. And so with these conversations, these are essentially conversations about voting. The topic is super simple, but each conversation we want to bring in different aspects. So today we kind of really want to discuss, what are the issues that Pakistani Americans are passionate about and how can we act upon those as, people that are involved in the Get Out the Vote initiative. I think Wase can also touch on this a little bit, but the Get Out the Vote initiative has been really interesting. We're trying to get as many people as we can to pledge to vote. And, when you think about it realistically, like saying you're going to vote, what does that do exactly? Well, that kind of clicked for me, I feel like in the last few weeks. Even I was kind of struggling to understand, like, what is this pledge to vote doing? And I realized that there are literally no resources that show, how many Pakistani Americans are eligible to vote, how many Pakistanis voted in the last election. Also, we've kind of found those statistics, but it's really difficult. And we've had to kind of take from like general Asian statistics and then break that down to see like, oh, this is how many Pakistani Americans maybe would have voted in the last election. So this is kind of that first push and attempt to see how engaged are Pakistani Americans and how can we slowly, or not slowly, but quickly increase that number. And so that is why we are here today. We want to hear from Pakistani Americans from all ages, all different backgrounds, groups, financial statuses, like anything. We want to hear from you. What are you passionate about this election? And how can we as a group that's working to get people more involved do better to engage different people? And so, yeah, like I said, with the 2020 election coming up, we think it's important to be vocal about representation in politics. And obviously, I think we can all agree that Pakistani Americans are not highly represented in politics, and we would only want to increase the amount of representation that we have. And so I think we will first start with talking about the GOTV initiative a little bit more. Wase, would you like to touch on it at all?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Misal. So I joined the Get Out the Vote initiative, earlier this year, and so far we have been just doing, especially in the last couple of months, as you've seen the momentum pick up in the election cycle. There's just been a lot more excitement around the content piece of it, and that is one of the directions that I think APF is pushing forward in. We're doing some very exciting partnerships like Millennial Brown, but also one of the things that I've realized as we've been doing this work is that yes, your pledge is power, and exactly what Misal was talking about, like having that information is also very powerful. But just in terms of doing this work, realizing the level of excitement and engagement in our community is actually like very much present. And in so many ways, it just needs a platform to be tapped into. And so where you might be thinking that, how many people in my community or in the spaces that I operate are actively plugged in a way that can have an impact, how can I connect with them? I think that work has become so critical to our success and to the success of this like Get Out the Vote initiative, that's just been crystallizing every week. And so I'm really excited about the upcoming content partnerships like with Millennial Brown, and just really excited to see, talk a little bit more about that today. So I'll leave it there. And actually one last point I'll make is that we're really focused on like longitudinal impact. So even going beyond the election, right? Civic engagement is something that carries forward consistently after the election. And so building those foundations for our community, I think are just super important. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Perfect. I think Isa now is going to read some statistics that APF has done research on, just to kind of give everyone a general idea of how involved Pakistani Americans are in voting and the election process. And this kind of might give us some context for our conversation that we'll have in a bit.
Okay, so I have some statistics like Misal said. So 40% of Pakistani Americans who voted in the 2016 election were actually first-time voters, which was shocking to me. Half of eligible Pakistani American voters did not vote in 2016. 80% of Pakistani Americans who voted in 2016 were not born in the US. 1 in 3 Pakistani Americans are under 17. And according to the US Census done in 2016, there are only 300,000 American Pakistani voters. And the last one, these statistics, these statistics are a motivation to get the Pakistani community more involved in civic engagement and particularly in voting. So do we want to discuss those statistics, or do you want me to just move to the questions?
I think like generally people can give comments on their thoughts. I know like when I was telling Isa about these statistics that we received from APF's like very amazing, talented, intelligent research, kind of committee, we were both kind of shocked and we were really surprised that the numbers were that low. Well, one, we were surprised, but the second kind of response was it was a motivation to increase those numbers and maybe kind of recognize that these numbers are not accurate and we need to up representation so that we can get factual numbers and present them to like our fellow community. And I feel like when the numbers go up, everyone, including us, will be more encouraged to get involved in civic engagement because we'll realize, oh my gosh, Pakistani Americans have such a great impact on elections or in politics in general, so why shouldn't we get more involved? So I think that's kind of why we wanted to show you guys the statistics before we start.
So maybe we can go around, people can introduce themselves. It's a small enough group and then they can share their kind of impression of that.
Exactly, yeah, perfect.
Okay. Do you want me to call on people for you? I can.
if you're comfortable, if you want to talk, that would be great. But if we have to call on you, we will. No, I'm kidding. But
you just want everyone to introduce themselves.
Yes.
Masal, you start.
Okay, I guess I'll start. I'm Masal. I go to GW. I'm based in Arizona, I guess. And so I'm working with the GeoTV initiative since back in May. And it's been a great time. And I'm here hosting this today. That's my introduction.
All right, I already introduced myself, but I'm going to give you folks a few extra seconds. So I'm Shamaila. I'm based in DC. I'm the president of the American Pakistan Foundation. I grew up in Ohio, and so I'm super interested in like domestic politics because of that, because it's just like a very active state, and I grew up in a very civically engaged community actually. So I have that to bring to the table.
I can go next. I'm sorry, I can't see any who's on the call, so maybe that's also why I was hesitating to speak up. But hi, everyone. My name is Fatma Salman. I am currently calling in from Los Angeles, California, but I'm actually based in DC. And just as a way of a background, I grew up obviously in LA. And so my background really with this initiative and this subject is really that I grew up around, my family members voting and taking that very, very seriously. I mean, very strong Punjabi, relatives always talking about politics and who they're going to vote for in the next election, and really remembering the change after 2001, after 9/11, and my family's politics really changing after that. And I think that's what really got me heavily engaged in understanding my community and where I come from a lot more. And it allowed me to also have those kinds of interesting and serious conversations with an older generation that may have resonated with one political party and didn't after certain, changes in foreign policy. And I think that's fascinating to me. And then to hear the statistics that you all are sharing, it kind of re-energizes me in that spirit, because it shows that there's another kind of wave of an understanding that this is another big moment in history where our vote will matter. And by ours, I mean minorities, people of color, and then specifically Asian Americans, Pakistani Americans. So it's really fascinating, and I'm excited to hear more about what you all have to share.
Awesome. Yeah. Anyone else want to introduce themselves if they feel comfortable?
Hello, my name is Nilofer. I am in Phoenix, Arizona. I know Masal. She's the one who introduced me to Millennial Brown. I started following. I truly appreciate and happy about her progress and the way this youth, our kids are working on these things and getting the community together, creating awareness of current issues and the problems that our generation will be or are facing. So I came to America in 99. We were in New York, saw the 9/11, what happened there. And feel like today is the most, in today's days and circumstances, how important it is for us, our generation and older generations to be involved in the politics and listen to our youth, like people like Misal and Fajr. So, and I am shocked to hear that 80% of Pakistanis are not voting. That is very shocking. And I wonder who are those people, because in our circle in Phoenix, Arizona area, I know everyone is highly involved and well aware of politics, and we all discuss what's going to happen. I wish you guys all the best, and here to support and create awareness and wherever possible, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. No, yeah, I think the point that, you know, Neelanji is making, like, it's exactly, you know, we are all kind of shocked seeing that only 80% of eligible Pakistani Americans are voting. And so, again, one, it is shocking and slightly disappointing, but second, it should be a motivator to encourage friends and family and literally any Pakistani American you know to vote and to get involved in this process. So yeah, anybody else that would like to introduce themselves? We're going to move on to questions, so you'll have time to also speak and share your opinions in those. But if anyone else wants to introduce themselves, please feel free.
I'll go next. Hi guys, this is Memel Zia. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm part of the Leadership Council. Thank you for putting together this webinar, and it's been really interesting following you guys on this GOTV initiative and reading all the statistics. I think I would be really interested to know why the people who aren't voting or aren't engaged aren't. Anecdotally, I feel like it tends to be people of the older generation. My parents are older, who maybe grew up in Pakistan and don't think their vote matters, or don't think that the issues that are important to perhaps us right now growing up in America are important to them. So I'd be interested to find out why those people aren't voting and how we can engage them more.
For sure, yeah. Anybody else?
Hi, I guess I'll go next. My name is Sana. I'm also based in Los Angeles, California, but I'm a rising junior at George Washington University with Misal and Isa. On campus, I'm a part of the GW South Asian Society and the Pakistani Students Association, and I'm also a politics writer for Millennial Brown. I think it's really great that you guys are doing this. I think the first step to change is bringing awareness. And my parents are definitely part of the large percentage of people who refuse to vote, and I think it's largely because of the stigma that involvement in politics has for a lot of parents. And despite the fact that they have super strong opinions on like international affairs and like Pakistan and Indian relations, I think it's just unfortunate that a lot of them refuse to vote, and I hope we can change that.
100%, yeah. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Isa Said. I'm based in Orlando, Florida. I'm Misal and Sana's friend. I also go to George Washington University. I'm a rising, or no, I guess I'm a sophomore now. And I was super interested learning about this initiative. I was so excited to collaborate with APF, with Millennial Brown. I'm the managing editor there. Just to see, like, it's always been a question, like my family and I talk politics at the dinner table, and I was kind of like, so they vote, but sometimes it's like, well, Pakistani politics comes first sometimes, and I'm kind of confused about that because we're like not living there. So I'm really interested to hear different stories and opinions of American Pakistanis like all over the country.
For sure, yeah. I can speak to my experience a little bit before we start with the questions. My parents, I registered both of them to vote about 4 weeks ago. And they have never voted in an election before. They're not involved politically. Though we have the means to donate to campaigns, we've never done that before. I don't know why I'm so political. I don't really know where that came from because it's not that much, it's not very present in my family. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but at this point, I do think it's kind of a bad thing. But they've been citizens for more than, I think, 5-6 years. And so it's really interesting to see. One thing I can say is I think Pakistani Americans, I don't want to generalize an entire, population, but people that come from Pakistan, like my parents, they grew up there and come here, they feel that they are distanced from American politics. They don't associate with themselves with being Americans, even though they are considered American citizens. And so I think that is one thing that I've been trying to kind of enforce in my conversation with my parents, is saying that, you are as American as me, or as someone that might look like a typical, stereotypical American. You have as much of a say in politics as those people do. And I think you should use the privilege that we have to vote. So that's kind of been my main way of convincing them. Either way, I was the one to register both of them to vote. So in these kind of situations, I do think you have to take action, and you have to be kind of forward. Even though they are your parents, you have to have that straight up conversation with them and say, hey, you're not voting. And I think you're not voting is kind of silence, and it shouldn't be that way. So yeah, why don't we get started with these questions? We have a bunch. Feel free to kind of interject whenever you can. Our first kind of question is super general and super broad, but feel free to speak up. First question is, what issues are you guys passionate about with this current election cycle? What are the ones that are getting you to the polls? Anyone can speak up to this. Anyone can speak up, no judgment. But basically the question is, what is getting you to the polls? What are issues that, you know, when someone says, why do you care about politics? What are the issues that you first bring up? So
can I go? Oh, also, guys, I'm not going to be the first one to speak every question. So this one's a freebie. So I spent my whole career in foreign policy. I was in the US government, and I came into like domestic politics, like my interest a little bit later because I was just so consumed with foreign policy. But what I became really interested in working in places like the State Department and at the White House and USAID, which does international development, is like how important it is for us as citizens to have like the infrastructure of government to service us, and how like historically, you know, Americans have paid into like government services and the bureaucracy so that we can get something in return. And I've seen that kind of dwindle in the past several decades, and it's concerning to me. And I've seen it like dwindle exponentially so in the past 4 years. So I feel like that's something that really motivates me and compels me to go vote, because if you don't have those systems, and if they're weakened and if they're underfunded, then that means the people that are typically ignored are going to be virtually non-existent, right? And then they have to find other ways to defend themselves or support themselves and work on their issues. So that's why I'm really, really motivated right now.
So this is Nilo. I think Shamila has summarized the whole why do we have to use our right to vote for the policy makers, what we are expecting from our community. So last time in the 4 years ago in elections, that was the first time we could vote here as US citizens, and it was very interesting experience. I went through each and every candidate on the ballot. I searched everyone, what they're offering, what's going on, how it's going to impact us, our neighborhood, our community, our kids in the future. And I found it very, that experience was amazing, you know, and how their information are available online. So same thing here this time. I got my ballot and I was waiting, you know, get enough time and searched each and every one. And of course, it's very important to use the right of vote. And it's interesting how, especially declaring your party, one of my friends told me after the elections were done last time, and then I had to declare my party. That way, what I noticed that we can choose which candidate we don't want in the future, and then at the end, in the main election, we can choose best of all, you know. So that was another interesting experience and advice that I had, and I had to listen to her, and I can see it's coming up. So it's very, very important to vote and look into ballot, and don't just blindly go for, okay, this is the party we want to go. We did not do it last time, and we are not doing this time either. That's what I tell my daughter. She's gonna be voting this time, first time. And I told her that you have to look at individual on the individual grounds, not just for the party. So yeah.
Yep, that makes, you know, perfect sense. I feel like a lot of the times people expect or people think that you should blindly follow whatever, you know, party is kind of running. And I feel like when it comes to politics, a lot of us are not taught the specifics on how do you, you know, look at research different candidates and how do you like find the proper information. And so I feel like these things, especially in the Pakistani American community, should be made more kind of open and should be more openly discussed. You know, who are good candidates, or where can we find information? Is Ballotopedia good, or can I request a ballot by mail? You know, how does that work? Where do I apply for that? Or there's a permanent early voting list. You know, my parents didn't know what that was. I didn't even know what that was. There's different regulations in different states. So, you know, straight up, like, it's very complex, but I feel like if we break it down and if we teach, you know, people that might not know as much, or if I don't know as much, I go to an expert. Really what I'm trying to say is, like, civic engagement fails without the participation of people, right? We need people to tell other people, this is what I'm doing, this is what works for me. And so I feel like this entire process is really dependent on us informing one another and just passing down information from one another. So I think that's really important. A great comment, Nilanti. Awesome.
Michelle, a couple of new folks joined, so maybe we can ask a question.
Yes, so we were just discussing a question that was, what issues are you guys passionate about this election cycle? So if anyone else would like to comment on that question. Really, what are the issues that are getting you to the polls this year? And anyone can speak to that.
And I can go ahead. I can just go ahead and answer
Awesome.
this again. I mean, it's very similar to Shamila, so I feel like it's maybe not as representative because I know that this is not how most Americans vote, but foreign policy is definitely, you know, on the top of my list, just because it's what I do day in and day out. And so it's very important to me that, you know, for me, at least when I'm looking at, like, for example, a party or a candidate to support, I have to know that they have some kind of plan. And like goes back to what Shamila said, these days, the plan is really to preserve an institution and to invest in that institution, right, to grow. But I also think that, you know, I've come to realize, especially in this cycle, that at least I and my demographic, whether that's, you know, Pakistani American, women, person of color, you know, we can't afford to be single issue voters. And so slowly, more and more, I guess, as older as I get, the more identities that I accrue, you know, I think of a lot of other things as well. Like healthcare is also at the forefront. You know, where are my taxes actually going? As a former educator, you know, education policy is something that is very much at the forefront of what I look at in a candidate and in a party when they're, you know, in this specifically in this campaign as well. Like basically, where are my tax dollars going to go, right? So whether that is if I support the specific foreign policy vision that a candidate sets out, to literally are my loans going to be forgiven or not, right? And then like what is my interest rate going to be, et cetera. So all of these things are really, really at the forefront of things that are going to be extremely important for me, you know, in the coming decade, right? And that's what I really have to think about.
For sure. And I think a lot of the issues that you're speaking to are not only representative in presidential elections, but also local elections. And I know we've discussed this, you know, in the GOTV group, that a lot of people tend to kind of surpass local elections and kind of put all of their focus on presidential. And I think with this initiative, we're not just focusing on presidential, we're kind of, you know, letting everyone know that voting is important all the time, not just every 4 years, but every year. And I think it's important for people to be, you know, involved in all of that process, which is kind of what you were touching on with those issues, because a lot of those are determined by, you know, local elections as well. Anyone else want to touch on that question? What issues are getting you to the polls? We can move on to the next one.
I'll go next. I'll echo what Fatma said, because coming from the foreign policy space, that's always what I've been interested in. But as I get older, I'm becoming more interested in domestic issues because I'm starting to get directly affected by them, like taxes, healthcare, things like that, but also climate change. So I'm starting to learn more about them, educate myself. And, you know, those are the issues that I'm going to be looking for coming up between the two candidates or the parties.
Hi, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, I just joined late, so I don't know this how broad this the scope of this meeting is, but coming to the issue, I think the way I'm looking at is because of pandemic, a lot of communities have been affected by um, job.
Your audio is cutting off a little bit. Sorry, didn't mean to interject, but we couldn't hear you for a second.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes. It just cut off for a second.
Yeah, sorry, I have a noise in the background. I just, so yeah, I think the issue that I want to raise, or would be something that I want to leverage in terms of the election, would be regarding the job situation, because in this pandemic, a lot of people are affected, and I think the biggest goal is to be able to get people back on the pedestal with the job situation. And I think that is something that that should be, coming hand in hand with working with the communities and helping out, not just with a volunteer working, that goes a lot with our community, but also how we're going to help people in terms of getting back to the jobs, or helping people in different fields that are affected. And the reason I raised that, because I'm in IT field, and there are a lot of a lot of outsourcing has been going on from the past couple of years, and a lot of U.S. citizens have been affected by that because of outsourcing situation, and jobs have been going to abroad or to other places for cheaper labor. And a lot of our new grad students or experienced professionals like me have been affected, and we had to compromise with the salary rate, the best that's been offered in the market. So I think that is also a big issue, and economically it's affecting, at a broader level everyone, but especially in our community. I think this is something we should leverage, especially in IT field. I think this is very important for us to move ahead in our growth, and that's something I would be looking into for the answers when it comes to the job growth.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone else? We can move on to the next question if there are no other points on that question. Isa, do you want to go ahead and start with the next question?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the next question that we have, are current politicians, whether that be local or national, representative of your values and beliefs? Anyone can answer.
Excuse me, just a clarification. Is the question, do current politicians reflect your values and beliefs?
Sure, represent or reflect, same thing.
Okay. And I'll type these into the chat so people can see them.
And we can,
awesome.
why don't we copy paste it?
Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
So yeah, again, anyone can touch on that question.
So I guess I'll go again, and this is just because there's a lot of silence, so apologies for speaking up too much, but I think this is a tricky question for me. I think my initial gut answer is no, and then once I start to peel away at the real question behind the question, right, of if I look at the general pool of congressional folks included in this, I think yes, some of them do, and some of the women, for example, in the House of Representatives, they definitely speak for a lot of the values that I stand by. But I'm having a lot of tough conversations, especially with my Californian friends, who don't feel, and these are Pakistanis, really, they don't feel like. And again, they're millennials, and so they don't feel like their vote matters. So why even vote now in the election, right? And it's really tough because my whole argument is that your vote, yes, it's a blue state, right? California is always going to go blue, but the one big question here is that, do you want to be a part of the statistics, right, that they say millennials don't vote, right? Because ultimately 2020 will be so reflective of the next voter base that any party is going to go and basically go and campaign towards, right? And we as in the millennials have consistently been, and I would say even I would hazard to say, given the stats that you all shared, Pakistani Americans are progressively becoming a demographic that maybe are not as appealing for campaigns to go out and appeal to, right? Because of the statistics that we keep turning over and that we're not coming out to vote. And so it's a very DC way of, I think, arguing why somebody should go out and vote in California, because it's very much of like, invest in the longer vision of your demographic, whether that's, whether that the identity that you hold on to is you being a millennial, whether that's you being Pakistani American, Asian American, whatever that is, right? But the thing is, you become the statistic that doesn't vote, or you become that statistic that, time and again doesn't vote, for X candidate because, because we're indifferent, right? They're not going to make the assumption that it's because we don't represent you or we don't reflect you. It's always consistently the analysis or insight is very basic, right? It's just that this demographic group is indifferent because they don't go out and vote, right? And for me, I think that in order for that to even change, and even for that to be a little bit more nuanced, we have to go out and vote, right? We have to become that statistic so that we draw attention to them. But all of that is like a long-winded way of saying, right now, I don't feel like I'm being represented. I do feel like some of my views and values are being reflected in some of the candidates, but I think that just comes with time. It's a long-term vision for me, at least. And so that's what keeps me invested and keeps me as like a continued turnout voter. But it's really hard to make that argument, especially for indifferent folks that are coming from states that are not swing states, that are already kind of red or blue states. It's just really difficult. And this is obviously in the context of a national election, but even sometimes in local elections, it's really difficult.
Such a great point. Yeah, that is something like we kind of bring up in our GOTV meetings all the time, talking about how that's such a prevalent thing that is kind of under discussed. But yeah, great point. Anyone else?
I would agree with Fatima, what she said, and I can hear her frustration, how millennials, I have a lot of nephews and nieces who are millennials at that age. And I hear them how much they and their generation, their friends are complaining, and we watch news and these medias and blogs and how much vocal millennials are. But I was bit disappointed with the primary their results for Democrats. I'm like, millennials they could have benefited a lot from those Democratic elections, and with the results, I was like, why are they talking so much and did not go ahead? And they were the one who were going to benefit out of the those elections a lot, and they did not even bother to go. Back to your question, Misal. So it's a tricky one. Yes, there are some leaders who are doing what they are expected to, what they are supposed to. For us at this age and stage, we don't have much to complain, but the way things have been handled in the past, this Corona situation and the riots and all this stuff, things went out of hand, and how the current leadership has handled locally and nationally is a bit disappointment, and the way the whole world was watching. And it's a bit disappointment at this point, especially with Corona situation, and how the police situation has been going on all over America. I wish there were better solutions. I wish there were more civilized solutions to resolve these issues. And I hope in the future we can find a leadership who can better handle these issues more appropriately. Yeah.
I just want to raise a point. I do agree with Fatima, and I'm sorry I forgot your name, but I think that's a great point. And as a millennial, I can speak for myself. I am not encouraged at all to go make an effort to vote. But this is a turning point for us. This is the turning point because a lot of things have happened in the past couple of months with the coronavirus, the riots. The nation is polarized. It's going in so many different directions, and it kind of disappointed me. But as a millennial, I feel the way I feel. It's just my perspective. It also encouraged me to stand up and say, this is, I'm looking for change. I demand a change. And that's the only way I see it. And it's not, but on day-to-day basis, when it comes to millennials and the generation after, we're not, too much into news. We're not looking into day-to-day, keeping up with the politics affairs. But with the current situation, it has affected all with our internal situation in the country, and also our foreign affairs policies that are affected, other countries like Pakistan. I mean, those who keep up with foreign affairs and politics outside of the country. So I think this is a major turning point, and it's just the way I see it. And for me, at least, I was not excited about voting, but now it has gotten to the point that I feel like this is it. You gotta take an action, and that's the way I see it. It's just the change that everybody's looking for, and it's just, we have to somehow encourage everyone. This is a change, and this election is gonna bring a lot of change within the party, whatever they're supporting. But it's definitely has touched the boiling point where I think everybody's frustrated, and I think including the millennials.
So just to pick up on your point, Faiza, where you mentioned excitement, and we've been talking about this, and somebody asked me the other day too, like, are you excited about the election? I was like, no, but it actually doesn't matter if I'm excited or not. Like, I actually still have to vote because, I mean, politics can be very, very boring. And I have to say, like, we keep talking about, millennials not voting or not being excited about it, but like, I was a political science, international affairs student, and I didn't vote until like I was, years after I had graduated. Like I just never even, because I just was not interested in it because I thought, oh, it just doesn't affect me, right? And it really, because it wasn't like personally part of my existence. And over time, over the years, like you start to, as a person, as the development that goes on in your brain, you start to realize, oh, I have articulated values of my own. This gets back to Misal's question. And then you can project those expectations of those values to be exercised on certain leaders, should they exist, if they exist. They may not exist. If they don't exist, that doesn't mean you stay at home. It means all the more that you should go out and vote, because, or you support people that might get to that point where they run. And that's where it gets back to this like ecosystem, right? To have leadership that actually represents values and ethics that you think are admirable and worthy of leadership, you need to support them from like the ground up. You don't just support them once they get into, into the ballot box, basically. And that's something I think we need to really like cement into the minds of people in our community at every age. I also think that there's this, there's not really like a focus on values and ethics in the sense that like a lot of us, our parents or we came from, Pakistan, where corruption is like rampant in politics. It just goes hand in glove with running for office. So it might be just that sentiment transfers here, and it is also corrupt here, and you see people getting away with things, and so it's very easy to get disenchanted. But I would also argue finally that there has to be kind of a distinction between values and ethics of your own and then values and ethics for the society within which you live. Because I think a lot of us do vote on our own personal values and ethics. Like, oh, that person is against these kinds of people, or this, they said this phrase and I'm against that. But then there's also the broader like good and the social contract between people and citizens and the government. And not every leader is actually going to say what I agree with, but they may still get the job done, right? And I think it takes a level of development and experience in life to get to that. And that doesn't, I'm not talking about you need to be older. I think you just have to be honest with yourself about the issues you care about, what you can deal with, what you can't deal with. So let me stop there. I'd love to hear from some of the other folks on the call.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And just to pitch in terms of national elections, I personally don't feel that the neoliberal hyper-capitalist society that is America will ever provide perfectly optimal politicians who can represent my values. Like when you analyze the route to power that many politicians take, they covertly sacrifice universal ethics and values for the sake of maintaining their positions of power. However, they will attempt to kind of be good. Like despite the fact that they are pressured to be pro-Israel, pro-law enforcement, you will see some good being done. I don't know if you guys have seen that tweet that's been making the rounds on people's Instagram stories, but it goes like, voting isn't marriage, it's public transport. You're not waiting for quote unquote the one. You're getting on the bus, and if there isn't one going exactly to your destination, you don't stay home and sulk. You take the one that's going to be closest to where you want to be. So that's kind of the position I'm taking. I will be voting, despite the fact that I won't be happy with my decision, on the ballot, but I think it's better than staying home and doing nothing.
Great point. Yeah. And I think like I actually posted something kind of similar to that on my story today, and talking about how like you should never be satisfied with any politician, because I mean, how can we just blindly follow someone and agree with everything that, they're saying? We're all human. And so no one's perfect. And we should kind of keep that same mentality when picking and voting for certain candidates. And so I feel like constantly questioning not only the political environment you're in, but the candidates that you have already elected. And doing that consistently is super important. And that kind of also touches on Sana's point, but yeah, really great point. Anyone else?
I have something to add, but I think I want to hear the next question, because I think it might be more related to something else that's going to be popping up.
Yeah, we just pasted the newer question into the chat. It says, in what ways can we engage different groups in politics? We wanted to ask this because, with the GOTV campaign, we're consistently trying to engage different people, whether that be different, age groups or different cultural groups, or people that were born in Pakistan or people that were born in the US. We want to be able to kind of cater to everyone. So how can we do that? How can we engage different groups in politics in general?
Awesome. Yeah, I think I'll jump in on that, because I think what I have is related to the previous question, but also chimes in on this. I think like when you think about our community and civic engagement, just like so many other things, it is in many ways a story about like opportunity meeting preparation. And I think that is so important when you think about a community and a community-led effort, just like Shamala was talking about, lifting people up from below, which is that you have to prepare yourself for when that opportunity presents itself. And I think that applies to so many different things in life, but it also applies to civic engagement. There is an organizing component of having an impact of the story of this moment, right? We're talking about, there's the pandemic, there's the Black Lives Matter movement, and there are people reacting to the Black Lives Matter movement. There's the economy and the position we find ourselves in, this very dramatic shift in just a handful of months, which all of that presents opportunity to get organized in a way that's not just organized for the sake of getting organized, but it's really about coalition building, right? And the one thing that I'll say, which relates back to the previous question, which is that there are the people who represent us in Congress, and then there is this entire, what I would call like this new arena of digital infrastructure, of this entire infrastructure and apparatus that exists entirely outside of people who are actually elected, but has an immense amount of influence on those people. The way that our congressmen and women get information these days, increasingly moving into the digital space. So things like Millennial Brown, the opportunities that offers on that platform and others in the online space, the ability to even be on that bus. When you think about the long history of this country, our opportunity and how we're benefiting from the work that so many other communities have done, to basically jump on that bus and kind of move forward together is the thing that gives me excitement. Obviously, I don't think any of the presidential candidates are super exciting. There's like, what is there to be excited about? You just have to kind of show up and do what you got to do. But the opportunity to build that coalition, and even outside of Congress, build the apparatus that has so much influence on those folks and the way that they're consuming information these days, is just like such a big opportunity. So that's the piece that gets me excited, and I think relates to the question you asked.
Amazing. Yeah. And I feel like voting shouldn't be, about how exciting it is, or though it can be exciting, obviously, especially as a first-time voter, I'm excited, but obviously not satisfied with the situation at hand. But I think it should be, it should be considered a duty, just like paying taxes, just like being nice and not littering in public, like it should just be as normal as those different actions. And so I feel like normalizing voting in the Pakistani American community specifically is super important. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with just this conversation. For example, hearing from people that are based in Arizona and LA, like you guys said, in Texas, in DC, and hearing from everyone and having like a shared experience and saying, okay, from this, we can all say, wow, voting is actually really important, not just this election, but all the time, because it's, making the things that we believe in become a reality. Yeah. Anyone else want to touch on, how can we engage different groups in politics?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Vikas from Brooklyn. I think there is a level of excitement that I feel is important because, or some kind of emotional response, because when it comes to the day itself, November 3rd, or whenever your early voting, mail-in voting date is, you're busy, stuff is happening, and then you might just, miss that opportunity, right? So what is it that's driving everybody? And to me, I think, like, even before the pandemic, it seemed that this country was in a state of emergency. Whether you see, kids being separated from their parents, or you see the Muslim ban, or you see the Charlottesville comments, it's just so shameful and embarrassing to me as a new American. I wasn't able to vote in 2016, and my friends who were in New York, I was like, you should still have gone and voted, because like people have been saying, that digital sphere is so important. Even if you're in a democratic state, if you go and vote and you put a picture of yourself doing that, somebody somewhere might see it, get inspired, and do the same, right? So you still have a lot of power and a lot of influence. And I think a lot of privilege. If you in this country are able to vote, you have so much power. And to me, it's dismaying. I understand when people say that, hey, both choices are like not that great, like we need to be somewhere totally different in terms of climate change or, so many important issues. But these are the options we have in front of us. And I think this year the passion will really come from getting rid of the federal administration that we have right now. And I think that's what's going to drive people. So I guess to friends who are wondering whether their vote matters, for somebody who lived in the United States for 10 years without being able to vote, I would say yes, your vote does matter.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you touched on privilege. I think that's really important to understand. I'm from Arizona. And so a lot of my fellow peers were DACA students, and they, are not able to vote. And so that is kind of one like mentality I have, is I vote for people that can't, whether that be people that are working, 9 to 5 jobs and they can't make it to the polls, or whether that be people that literally are not citizens and cannot vote. And so I feel like privilege is super important to understand with specifically this election cycle, but just in general, if you can do it and other people can't, take the initiative and just go vote. Yeah, really good point. Anyone else? We have a few more. Sorry. Go ahead, my bad.
I would like to add how to encourage people. It's very important. In Arizona here, I see people are already, tech savvy, and in our masjid, we have this group and we get so many emails and WhatsApp messages, how they are encouraging voting. They hold webinars for even, people who are staying home, moms and parents. I mean, over here, it's in our masjid, it's so much is going on. And I know the people in New York and especially in Brooklyn, Queens, Texas, Houston, there are majority of Pakistanis are, and they have been there for generations, maybe second or third generation. I think over there, they're people, and I think the older people are not even educated. If there is some kind of platform we can find to create awareness, and masjid is, I think everyone goes to masjid, especially older people. And I think that's a very great way to connect and educate those people who have, who are not convinced or don't realize the importance of their voting rights. That's one of the suggestion I can give, that I have lived in New York, and I know so many people out there who are not educated. So that's one thing I can think of. Go ahead, Shamila, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you said that, because in the kind of the preparation for launching our Get Out the Vote initiative, I've always been interested in these issues, but I did some extra work just looking at kind of what kind of civic engagement does exist for our community. And what I found is that and voter education as well, which is what you're talking about. What I found is that a lot of the money that comes from foundations and grant making organizations for this, and for communities like ours, will go to Asian American organizations, which are doing amazing work. They're doing amazing work. But then when you look at the kind of the number distribution amongst the Asian American community, the diaspora, the Pakistani American community will get kind of pushed to the side a little bit. Mostly, I mean, one, because we're not as big as some of the others, even though we are pretty significant. And the other is just that we're not as represented in those spaces. So meaning, people in our community don't work on those issues. They don't participate in large numbers. Although if you go to local communities, you will find the doctors and the engineers and the lawyers and the teachers, they're actually like very involved in civic life, but not as a collective, maybe individually with their smaller organizations, local organizations. And I think this is just because people have the time they can give, and that's it. You don't have time to build a national platform as a hobby. So it makes me think, that APF could actually get to that point where we can offer that platform and we can tap into those sources of funding and support to basically create these voter education programs in these communities where they're basically relying on their community leaders who have other jobs to do it, or they're benefiting from, say, like the Arab American legal center or something for Asian Americans. And what this could do for us is that it would give us more individualized attention, and you could do things that are more language based. For example, like APF right now, we couldn't work with just, if you're only like Punjabi speaking or only Urdu speaking, like we would need a lot of help to do that. I mean, look at this conversation, you know what I mean? It's just, we're very isolated in some respects. And so the level of funding would need to be there, and we want to get to that point. And I think this kind of conversation will definitely get us there. But Misal made this point, like this is for all backgrounds, all kinds of people, and we definitely are not capable of that just yet, but that is where we want to go. So I'm just super glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and like I can speak to, for example, I live in Peoria and Nilo lives in Scottsdale, but those are both in Phoenix. We don't have any of that. We have a local masjid, but very inactive in politics, but the Scottsdale masjid is. And so that shows like just half an hour away, people are engaged, but my community is not. And so it's kind of a matter of figuring out, okay, how can Misal, who lives in Peoria, get involved with the Scottsdale masjid and get involved in those, voter education events or get involved in those webinars. And then I connect that group to a group in DC or a group in LA or a group in Texas, and we all unite and say, hey, we're Pakistani Americans and we're all learning to vote or learning about voting together. And so it's really about like, we all have our personal connections, but how do we make that network into like a huge network that's pretty unified and communicating with each other constantly? We have about 10 minutes left, correct? I just want to check the time. We can, I think, talk about maybe one or two more questions, but then at the end, I really want to touch on ideas for where you can send our pledge form and talk more about our pledge form. So Isa, do you want to go ahead and ask the next question?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we have a few more, but you can pick whatever one.
Okay. Is there a stigma against voting or being political in the Pakistani community?
Again, anyone can
answer.
Yeah.
I can say from personal experience, like my family and I do talk about politics, but it does always have like everyone's a little bit on edge for some reason when we talk about politics. Not anything bad, but I don't know why American politics just kind of I think revs everyone's emotions up a little bit, and we're super passionate about it. And then for someone maybe like my parents, especially my dad, who's like, I don't see the point of voting, then it's like me being like, you have to, like, you have to understand the reason, and there has to be like some initiative taken. So I'm like really excited to teach my parents about that. So
I think a
but
lot of times they look at politics, keeping Pakistan in mind, especially first and second generation Pakistani Americans. So how does this candidate, how will this person do for Pakistan, right? And not necessarily Pakistani Americans, not necessarily Muslims or Muslim Americans, just how does this affect back home? And it's kind of hard to bring the conversation around as to we need to focus on how it affects us. How does it affect you and I who live here and who will continue to live here for a long time? And how it's going to impact us, whatever choice we make this year or the next year. So yeah, I think like my family is into politics too, but we discuss both American and Pakistani, but it always comes back to, well, so-and-so candidate is good for Pakistan, or so-and-so party has done better for Pakistan. And
Yeah.
to me, that doesn't make sense for us to have, like, I think that's a separate conversation.
Yeah. And I think like maybe I'm just in my brainstorming mind, but I'm thinking like it would be really beneficial if maybe APF or Millennial Brown or maybe collaborated to create some kind of language to talk to Pakistani parents. Maybe we can have it in Urdu and in English that will make it easier for us to convince, you know, and I don't want to generalize all Pakistani parents saying no parents care about voting, but there are a select number, unfortunately. So maybe we can get together and create some kind of language that can make it easier to convince our parents and help them understand why voting in the US is as important in maybe, you know, voting in Pakistan, or maybe if they don't think that's important, convincing them why, you know, this entire process is super relevant today.
If I may add, and I do think that it's not that they don't care about voting or politics. They do. If you can see, like, you know, there's like someone mentioned New York, there are protests in New York and Times Square for things related to Pakistan, and in DC, and people are involved, and those are the first and second generation Pakistanis. Maybe they have you know, maybe they're able to vote or not, I don't know, but you know, they do get excited about politics, and as you guys all know, there can be very heated discussions on politics in our homes, but it's just how to make them excited about politics in America as well,
and how to push that next step. Like, obviously it's not like they don't know anything. We can't say that they're uneducated. They're extremely educated, intelligent people, but how do we make that process keep going forward and turn into new things, new ways of civic engagement? Yeah.
I think
I would like to add
go ahead.
Isa's question and comment when she said that her dad is not convinced. I think I coming from Pakistan, or while we were living in Pakistan, my whole youth time I was there, and how Shamila mentioned how, and we all know how the corruption and the system, it was like a whole chaotic system there. But while I was growing up, I think when we come into this country, it takes some time to understand the politics, to understand the difference. In Pakistan, you guys have no idea, Masal and Aiza and kids who were born and raised here, you guys have no idea what kind of lifestyle there is. And there is that disconnect. There is that huge gap which we need to fill, to the parents, to the people like my generation or older generation, to educate them or to tell them. In Pakistan, once people, I mean, voting in those times was not even real voting, to be honest. It was all rigging, and God knows how they were being selected. So people come here with the same mindset. But over here, but they need to realize that once you vote or you have questions, your voices are being heard. It's very important to know that to some extent you are being heard. You know, you can go and ask, you can hold your leaders accountable. You know, we have leaders here. Do you remember what Jeff Flake? Jeff Flake, what's his name? He comes to our masjid every year. You know, we are over here, politicians are so much involved in our community, in our Scottsdale Masjid. People are so up to date to that, you know, level. Maybe Scottsdale Masjid and their organizers, Sadia Zubairi and all those, Masal, I will give you their numbers. You can connect to them.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, and they are, I mean, it's such an organized environment here, which can create awareness into other cities, especially like in New York. Vikas was mentioning his frustration. In Brooklyn, I know there the majority of people are not even educated there, you know. They're doing, you know, it's a different kind of community there who needs a lot of education. So yeah, there is a gap that needs to be filled in order to convince people.
And I think filling that gap is really up to all of us. It shouldn't be like a blaming game where like someone's not educated enough. I think all of us need to get more educated and also inform each other in the process. So not to rush, but I do want to get to the last part. Thank you guys so much for participating in the conversation itself. It was so fruitful. We made notes of a lot of the things that you guys are talking about so that we can actually like act upon them. I want to thank everyone so much for coming. These last 2 minutes are going to be super important. I'm going to be talking about the Pledge to Vote form. So if you weren't here at the beginning, the GOTV initiative with APF created this Pledge to Vote form that essentially is having Pakistani Americans say that I will vote in the 2020 election. And with this long list, we hope to get 10,000, 100,000 signatures, as many as we can get. You know, we're very optimistic in that sense. We want to see how many Pakistani Americans are getting engaged. And we want to, you know, flex this number and show off on our socials and show off in the news that, you know, Pakistani Americans are a super important sect of the US population that politicians and people should care about and should consider when making laws and making changes in our system. And so I'm going to link a kind of fake message that I have created. And it's basically, I encourage all of you. Well, one, I will send the link to the Pledge to Vote form. If you have not signed it already, that would be amazing. You can do it right now while we're on the call. So we have a sense of accountability. I can say, okay, I got 20 people to sign the Pledge to Vote form tonight. So if you can fill that out right now, all you need to do is put your first name, last name, and I think click a box and you are good to go. I think there's a little bit more information you can put, but that is really it. So I would appreciate if everyone could sign this form. The second step is we need you to send this to as many people as you can, whether that be, you know, Pakistani American family friends, whether that be your masjid group chat, like Nilo Auntie mentioned. If you have a huge masjid group chat, obviously not assuming all of your masjid participants are Pakistani, but if some of them are, that would be a great place to send it. Send it to your PICO groups, send it to your UPNA groups, whatever Pakistani cultural organizations exist. If you are in a Pakistani student association in your college or you know one that exists near you, send it in that group chat. Try to think of different sources. Are there any resources that I'm not mentioning that you guys would think would be a good place to send it? So maybe we can learn about it too and get in contact with them. Anyone?
So I would like to add to that again, it's you guys, you know, people who have access or tech savvy people are the one. It's a handful of people. It's not a lot. I'm telling you, Houston there's a huge Pakistani community. LA, San Jose, you know, Northern California. There are so many Pakistanis compared to Phoenix is a very small Pakistani community. And I know there are generations who are living in. So those people, my concern is how will we get to them? You know, that I mean, getting these forms or pledges to people who ever have access to phones and internet is very easy. These days things are very simple. But people who can't even use iPhone or, you know, the smartphones, how will you get their consents or awareness to them? We don't even know who are those people, how many are there. So that is the 80%. I can immediately think of those people. They are the 80%. Or part of majority of 80% who are not voting.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Shamal, if you want to speak to that a little bit.
I mean, I think it's a good point. It's good to keep us realistic and grounded. I sort of see all of you as joining as ambassadors for the other communities that you're part of. And, you know, we don't expect everyone to be able to come on Zoom and go to our Instagram and be on Twitter, that sort of thing, or even go to our website. So that's why we're hosting these conversations. And we'll be doing this every 2 weeks until November 3rd. So, you know, if you thought this conversation was useful, you know, tell a few folks in your community to sign up for the one 2 weeks from now, and show them how to use Zoom. You know, there's always a, you know, first time for everything. And I think the small format actually works really well because we can be honest with each other and cordial at the same time. And Misal and Isa, are, like, you are wonderful moderators, and I think the vibe of Millennial Brown is like very conducive to, like, you know, meeting people of different backgrounds and opinions. So that's just one way. You know, I know that we're not going to get everyone who's not kind of tech aware, but you know, also I think you can all, like, if you have time, like, take time to like make phone calls with folks, bring it up if it happens to come up in conversation. You know, it just takes a little bit of time, and it's easy to just say like, oh, never mind, I'm not going to talk about this, you know, but I think it is critical to do that.
Yeah.
The suggestion, you guys can have more ambassadors in all over this, especially where the majority of the Asian communities are. Have ambassadors there, as Shamila suggested, and those people can find out, you know, the families they know, and just like Shamila said, that one at a time, you know, you tell few families or few people who, if you know that they are elderly and they don't have access to internet or don't know how to use these things, maybe they can 2 or 3 families, each person can go and talk to them. That's a good idea, and slowly and steadily.
Yeah. So I think we will kind of conclude with that. I encourage everyone, I have sent the pledge form in the chat. So first thing, you should sign that out. And then right after that, start texting it to your family group chats, your friend group chats, whatever Pakistani American, you know, send it to them. Every few weeks, I will just call up a bunch of my family and friends. I'll steal my mom's phone occasionally and call all of her contacts and just say, hi, I'm Misal, I'm working with this campaign. I think voting is important, especially for our group, our community. And then, you know, I've gotten a lot of signatures that way. So that's the way to do it. I think just constantly contact people that you know and just spread the word in your communities. And, you know, hopefully this will be as successful as we want it to be.
Yeah, Misal is right. I think you're winning, Misal, amongst our little group there. So stealing your parents' phone, that's step one, rather than what we've been saying.
Basically, yes.
Let me just briefly say, I want to thank you so much, Misal and Isa. I'm so excited about this collaboration, and for your preparation and the thoughtfulness that you put into this conversation. And also to our attendees, you know, thank you for sharing your, you know, precious evening time with us. I hope that you will encourage friends and family to join us for other sessions, and we will keep in touch with this group and send you future announcements, because if we did this like every 2 weeks until November, think about how many conversations and minds we could reach. So I think, but we can't do that with all of you. So we look forward to your cooperation. So.
Yeah, that is all from us. I'm going to paste one more thing. If you are on Instagram, I encourage you guys to keep up with both American Pakistan Foundation and Millennial Brown. We'll be posting updates. And then, like Shamila said, you'll get emails all the time from us on updates as well. So thank you guys so much for coming.